All right, so welcome everybody to today's Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. Great to see you all here. Last committee meeting for the year. I'd like to welcome everyone with karakia. Ku tau mai I runga, ku tau mai I raro, ku tau mai I waho, ku tau mai I roto. Ki tau ao te mori tū, te mori ora ki te katoa. Homie, hoie, take. So, apologies at the time of the agenda, so we've got no apologies, we've got everybody here, which is great to see. Declarations of interest, just a reminder, if there's anything that looks like conflict, please remove yourself from that item of the agenda. Public forum, we have had no one request to speak from the public. And confirmation of minutes from our last meeting in October.
Happy to move those if need be.
Yep, second.
Fantastic. Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Lyndall. In favour?
Aye.
Confirmed. Notification of extraordinary items. There has been none through. Questions. I did get, I think there's one here, Alistair, which I think you can probably ask at the right time. Is that-
No, yeah, the right time, yeah.
Yep, that's fine.
Strange for me to do it at the right time.
And Chairman and Councillors' reports. So yes, just for myself, end of the year, last Audit Risk Committee. So it's certainly that time where we can reflect on what we've done. Our committee set by the terms of reference, and then we have a activity plan which outlines for each committee what we're going to tackle. So I think it's a good opportunity, and we've got it in our agenda for later on for us to reflect on how we have worked and whether we're happy with that activity plan so that as it stands. So as you're sort of going through today, we've got a number of standing papers that we get. We've got a number of sort of papers that go in there, and then we can come together at the end and reflect on that and how it has worked. I also think it's a good time to reflect on what we ask the staff to present to us in terms of that level of detail. Staff are busy and just want to make sure they get the right level there, not too much and not too little. So we can have that discussion later on as well. Those are my thoughts. Anyone else got anything they would like to share? Right, we'll jump into the first item on the agenda. The risk management report, just scrolling into that now. 1.1, Tanya, welcome.
Thank you.
Our number one agenda item each time, so nice and familiar with it. Thank you very much for your paper updating. If you just want to sort of maybe touch on some of the
Yep.
key points since we've last spoken.
Certainly. The key points for this report are the significant amount of work going into a how-to guide, so we can commence the rollout across the organisation so that our operational risks are being identified by our teams. That's taking quite some time. It is quite detailed. There has been a significant amount of management review, but it is all but there, which is pleasing. And we will be commencing that rollout early in the new year, getting the teams together, getting the leadership forum together, and introducing that across the organisation with a significant amount of support from the risk team. Business continuity is the other point. We have previously provided, and I think we still do in here, yes, a number of actions that have been taken following our risk exercise earlier in the year. The business continuity plan itself has been finalised. I'm investigating options as to where we can place that electronically for access to all of the business response team, but equally there will be a paper copy, printed, hard copy, bound for all of the members of the business response team. Happy to take any questions on any of those points.
Tanya, I might just start off. So great to see some progress getting made on the risk management and embedding that from the organisation. I think it'd just be good just to remind us all in terms of operational risks and sort of embedding those in and getting the staff to understand them more. Just maybe an example or two of what we could possibly expect to see in that area, because different departments have different things that they're doing. So what could that look like in terms of how when the staff sort of pick this up, operational risk management?
Probably one example which I've focused on in the how-to guide is one risk that is currently in the biosecurity area is the use of a particular pest poison, if you like, which is having an impact on wild deer and how they're looking at managing that, some of the mitigations if they do use it, what they have to put in place, but equally starting them thinking about what are the alternatives that they can use. So they've gone through the full risk process of identifying the risk, looking at the causes, consequences, looking at what controls they can put in place. Biosecurity, to be fair, is quite advanced in their risk thinking, but part of that rollout across the organisation is hopefully sharing that knowledge from those that are using risk really well, and sharing that knowledge, information and examples across the rest of the organisation. So
I think that's a good example. I think that important bit of some departments will be part of their day-to-day already, but others that may be less so.
Exactly, and one other point I'd like to make is we're trying to clearly define between operational risk and health and safety hazards / risks, which is a subset of our operational risks. So we're trying to provide some guidance on that as well.
Yeah, Jeremy?
I'm just thinking with the chemical side of things, I take the use of obviously the chemicals come with data sheets and all the handling and everything. There is a pretty good guideline of how it's to be operated in chemical these days.
Yes.
First port of call.
From what I've seen, they're also looking at they can encapsulate the use of that particular poison through bait stations as well to limit the access to it. But I think the key is from the biosecurity team, they're looking at alternatives.
And just to speak more broadly about the matter of stealing the chemicals and having chemicals and data safety sheets, it was one of the findings, I don't know if you'll recall, that came through from our last health and safety audit, and there was a piece of work done to make sure that all of our chemicals are being looked after and have the necessary requirements to make us legislatively compliant and also safe.
And just lastly for myself, so on the business continuity planning side, so great to see again progress getting made there. On note, and it's pretty common with organisations in terms of that reliance on IT, making sure that sort of there's alignment there. So just be keen to hear a bit more on that, just in terms of, I can imagine it's always a bit of a work in progress, but just in terms of how that's playing out.
Yeah, what was identified through the business impact analysis, which formed the basis for coming up with the critical processes and workarounds within the business continuity plan, there's a very clear section in there around the IT hardware that different departments and areas are reliant on for their critical processes, and software. So that's all been identified, and that will be shared with IT, which hopefully will form part of their disaster recovery plan. But yeah, as we've finalised the plan now, that will be shared, if not before Christmas, early in the new year.
Okay. So importantly, the business has identified what it needs, and then it is having that conversation with IT. So they've got their piece. Okay.
I'll move that recommendation.
Fantastic. Moved by Nicole and seconded by Phil. Thank you. Favour? Moved by Nicole and seconded by Phil. Yes. Carried. Thank you very much for that. 9.2, our internal audit report. Just moving to that page now. Page 18. Tanya, again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
haven't moved. Yeah, just a quick overview of this report. Again, there's an update on the items that were being progressed under the procurement contracts management internal audit. The asset management internal audit, there is discussions being had with PwC around their report. And there has also been some scoping of the upcoming audit for early next year.
And just add to that through you, Chair, so that is a cybersecurity report, so some of the matters about IT which were raised in the previous report are being looked at by the IT team. We had hoped to get the asset management audit back to you for this meeting, but it'll have to be next meeting because we haven't completed our management response to that, and we'd like you to see the entire audit with that response. So there are a number of teams involved in that audit, and making sure that we get around them all to inform that management response has taken some time. So we'll have that for you early in the new year at the next meeting.
So just to remind the committee, this is an important tool that we've got, that we now got the internal audit program up and running. That one report on procurement and asset management in play, and then cyber security coming up, so we can get that assurance over what is happening. Jeremy?
Just one question. I was just looking at the progress around procurement and contract management. And it was a question I was just hoping to see it and not have. There's obviously questions about, bills coming in, and maybe one's been the quality cost, and actually looking at the contracts and just reviewing, are we the value for money, and making sure everything's being done as it is. I take it I see that develop new, get the glasses on, requires contracts to be reviewed as part of the invoice pro. So that would cover that we're reviewing what we're getting invoiced, that we're actually getting done, just to
I believe that
everything
is
above board.
the intention. Maybe
Is that right?
I think we'll ask the theatre to come forward.
Because there is quite, people from the public go, oh, that seems agreed. It's just more saying, maybe not the Wallaby one, but even the contracts that some of the public are questioning, oh, that seems expensive. Can you show us what we got for the money? And I suppose that's the process, that making sure the contracts, while we're getting an invoice, we're getting a review, make sure that we're not just signing checks off willy-nilly.
So the purpose of the business case for the technology is to be able to, in part, better connect contracts to payments to make it a much more rigorous process, but it's also to improve the workflow about when we receive an invoice and making sure that it gets paid timely, there's no risk around that. The other key part of the proposal, the action plan that relates directly to your question, is that final point, which is through the organisational redesign project. We are proposing, considering to add a new role which has a focus on procurement and contract management. And as part of that role, if that is what we decide to do, we would be wanting the person to also look at all the contracts that we have in place, do some strategic supplier reviews, check that we are actually, using the best approach to the way we're contracting, and try to drive better outcomes for us through that contracting. But we're not yet at that point in the organisational redesign process to confirm that is what we will definitely be doing.
Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at page 18, and I'm just a little bit of explanation about this. The paragraph I'm asking about is entitled Internal Audit Program Overview, and it says that the second sentence, good governance fosters trust and confidence in public services and empowers decision makers to make well-informed decisions, and that's obviously a given. But then further down in the paragraph, it doesn't refer back to that. It says PwC has begun to undertake a rolling program, etc. And then it's got a number of bullet points, about 8 of them, and none of them really relate to that particular sentence, except perhaps the second last one in relation to stakeholder engagement. But I wonder how those things are connected and what part of the audit is the assessment of good governance.
Yeah. Amy, would you like to?
I'll have a start of 10 and then anybody else as well can chip in. But I think the point that we're trying to make there is that having an internal audit program is in itself governance over the work that we're doing, and then is able to provide assurance to governors as part of the structural governance that that we are, doing what we say we're going to do, how we say we're going to do it, and that we're compliant with our policies, procedures, etc. So I think that's the point that it's making there, as opposed to we are auditing governance, if I understand your question correctly.
Yes. We are not auditing governors.
No.
No. But we should be.
So you're right in terms of the way I think about that question is the Audit and Risk Committee, our terms of reference in our scope does include risk over governance. And so, I believe in our risk register, hopefully it is a line in there, and that we should, if we want to, ask questions over that in terms of making sure we are managing that risk right. And that's certainly within the remit of this committee.
There is a report later on in this agenda which talks about our performance in relation to the long-term plan, and that addresses this issue to some extent. So maybe we can have a discussion about that then.
Yep.
Just to add to that, another way of looking at it is that on a three-yearly cycle, our ratepayers have a vote in whether they think there's good governance being exercised over the organisation through the election process. So that could be another way of looking at that.
Yeah, pretty blunt tool that is.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a question about those bullet points that Morris was referring to. Are they in any particular priority order? And if not, who decides what order they will be in?
The order that it's currently in was initially agreed by the executive. However, they have reserved the right, and quite rightly so, to await feedback from the internal audits that have already been done and rearrange the order appropriately, which is why, as Amy mentioned, cybersecurity has been bumped up the list a wee bit, given it's a topical subject.
And actually in relation to that, I think we might have, it was either part of this commentary or the commentary that we brought last time, was to say that it seemed appropriate for us to defer the accounts payable, accounts receivable audit due to there were organisational design considerations going on at the time, but also it sort of seems out of step to do that before we've implemented the procurement recommendations as well. We're sure that we'll be saying some things that we already know, and be far better for us to implement that system and to have it embedded for several months before actually reviewing how that activity works. The other thing is we had started the legislative compliance review. At the same time, we were engaging with PwC. So that's actually a concurrent activity, and it's being done independently of them. And I'll talk further about that in the activity plan item.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Move that report, Mr. Chairman.
Morris, move. Seconded by Alistair. In favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. Morris and then Alistair. 9.3, Paul and our health and safety report.
Good
Where's
afternoon,
report?
everyone.
Paul?
Great, thank you for giving me the opportunity to meet with you this afternoon. I take the report's been read. Just a couple of things just to highlight. One being is under the general operations side of the report, talk about doing contractor assessments and so on. So the quarter that this report is referring to is actually quite a busy time for our contractors in the catchment operations area, where they are providing their works rates and so on, and it's an opportunity for us to review their health and safety procedures and processes, and to essentially give us some assurance that the contractors that we intend to employ going forward are meeting at least a minimum standard according to us. So myself and my colleague have been reviewing these contracts and pre-qualifying them as such, ready for them to be engaged in work. Other piece I just wanted to highlight was just the notable incident that we had around aggression towards one of our staff members. This incident has been referred on to the police, and we viewed the incident as severe enough to warrant us to issue a trespass notice to the individual, and that should be coming up for its first review early in the new year.
So that happened 12 months ago?
No, that happened in I think it was either July or August. Okay. Yeah, so it's sort of 6 months. So yeah, I think it's in my calendar for February next year to be reviewed. On the subject of aggressive behaviours and so on, so our task force has come to its natural ending. So we've submitted a plan to our GM sponsor, who's busy reviewing that plan at the moment to take to the executive. Some of the actions already that have been recommended are already in play as we speak. So there's already action being taken, particularly around our telephone system and things like that, which is one of our key recommendations from that task force. That task force will get together again in about 6 months' time just to review how we're tracking against our actions and give a bit of an update to the executive. Right, any questions?
Jeremy?
Oh, sorry. Just on that incident, was it a verbal or actually physical? Are you able to tell us?
So it was, they were wearing their body cams. So yeah, it was significant enough for us to consider that potentially it needs to be referred on to the police, I'm not I don't think I want to necessarily make a call to say that there was actual physical contact, but there was a point where we all felt that there was a.
It's obviously more than like we usually have intimidation and things.
Yes,
like that.
So
They were threatened, really threatened.
Yeah, so the officer felt threatened enough.
Yep.
Alistair?
Well, I just noticed when you go to vehicles, and I sometimes tend to go there.
Yes.
You've done 198,000 kilometres. You've had 884 speeding events plus 10. Is that important?
Sorry.
You've had 884 speeding events and plus 10.
Yeah.
Is that important?
I think it is.
Tell me more.
Our speed limit is at the speed limit. So 100, for example, our speed limit is 100. Going beyond 100 is considered in the eyes of the law of speeding. And going plus 10 kilometres over the speed limit is most certainly speeding.
But 884, if you divide that out, that's quite a few every day.
Yep.
Now we go on to the total number of plus 20, 39 of them.
Yep.
Do you find them?
Yep. So, sorry, am I
Do
finding
you
them?
find them?
No.
Well, how do you
Got a
reprimand?
jar.
So that's a nice segue into the action we've taken. Traditionally we've been receiving these reports, and we've had EROs in our vehicles for several years now. But we've really taken a far more proactive stance against those offenders that are, taking speeding for granted. We've implemented a system of actually providing the reports to our managers now. So over the last 3 or 4 months, the managers have actually been receiving an individual report. And we've taken it a step further, that we've actually identified some criteria in the report that if an individual exceeds the speed over a certain number, they have what we call a pretty robust safety conversation. So they'll have a conversation, and the good news is that we have now seen over the last couple of months, we've seen a significant reduction. And I'm hoping to report at our next quarterly report that we most probably halve that number, if not more.
That would be worthwhile because we don't want to lose our chairman.
Break it into staff and council.
Thanks, Paul.
But the important thing to also note is that a lot of our speeding events they're spikes, so they're jumping into the zone and out of the zone very quickly, which is
Well, that's where
Timing issue.
how I see it. It just happens.
Yeah, and it could be either drifting over the speed limit, so lack of concentration, or it's at a speed zone change, and they haven't quite slowed down enough, or start speeding up too soon. So they are very short spikes.
Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. Roads and travel are always going to be high profile, very visible, risks. But the less visible health and well-being and mental health is awareness week, as you've referred to. That's something that's not so visible and almost more dangerous and certainly more insidious. Without specifics exactly, do we track the uptake of the what's called the EPA? No, the
EAP.
EPA, and the use of that, and even the physiotherapists. Do we track the use of that? And
Yes, yeah. So I've got direct access to the physiotherapist, so I can speak comfortably to that. Absolutely, yep. So our physiotherapist is in every month, doing not only our desk assessments and so on, but also spending time with individuals that potentially have had an injury, and also making sure that our vehicles are properly set up and so on. So we have it come in at least once a month, and we keep the relationship, because if we do recommend a physio, we always recommend our physio to anyone who's potentially had a non-work related injury or anything like that. As far as EAP goes, that'll fall more into the P&C side of things, so they monitor that side of things. So I'm not too sure of the numbers.
I mean, we don't need necessarily to see a regular report of that, but if there was a spike, or then that information would need to come to us, because there's something.
Yeah. There's a heightened awareness across the leadership team, in particular, around the psychosocial risks and the harm that it can do. We are busy. There's lots going on. It doesn't help that there's a lot of pressure on people. There's some difficult conversations happening all across Southland itself, around all bits and pieces. So, our management team in particular are aware of it, and they are, keeping their finger on the pulse, and they do raise, if they have a concern, absolutely raise the concern to myself and the team.
Amy, would you like to?
And when it comes to us.
I was just going to say, we also have, I'm probably not going to get the name right, but like a mental health first aid team of people who are trained across the organisation, which isn't just people and capability, but, try to get some representation in there, so that if staff are, or members of staff are feeling some sort of pressure, they have people outside of EAP or perhaps P&C or their direct line manager that they can go and talk to as well. So there's plenty of provision there. We wouldn't always capture that data though in those sort of more informal routes where people might seek support.
Just interested, Andrew, in where you think, what level of tolerance this committee needs to have for when that comes to us if there's a systemic issue. I'm not suggesting that there is currently, but how does that come to us in a timely manner if there's something that needs to be done?
Yeah, well, I think it is completely valid that something would come up.
Yeah. As long as
And be
there are
ordered through.
pathways and a trigger point.
Absolutely. John?
Oh, no, nothing informal. There's just, is there a correlation between the type of vehicle that you're having issues with speeding, or is it across the board?
No, it's across the board.
Heavy acceleration wouldn't come in a Ranger.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Morris. Has moved. All seconded, in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. Oh, appreciate your time.
Sure, I think I've got the next one also.
Yes, that is our
Yeah.
deep dive. So, 1.4, page 31. So our strategic deep dive for this quarter.
Yep, so that's part of our deep dives that we've been doing around some of our strategic risk. This one is in particular looking at how we manage health and safety risks. And the event being is the inability to adequately protect workers and the community from hazards or events which compromise their physical and emotional well-being while delivering council services. So I did this deep dive, and it was a fairly enlightening deep dive because it gives you an opportunity to almost critique your own work and to see how how things have, or when I started and how it's progressed, or either gone forwards or backwards in that space. So it was almost a sort of a bit of an enlightening moment for me, a bit of an aha moment to kind of look at some of the stuff that has been done and is currently underway. I do always reflect back on the fact that we've had quite a few good audits being done on our health and safety management system in particular. And they always come back with good recommendations, and we are tracking those recommendations through the health and safety report. So we are, those are gaps that are being identified when we do our auditing and so on. So it's there is that I always go back to and try and make sure that whatever we're doing from a health and safety perspective, that we're focusing on those key findings, because that's most probably where that's where the gaps have been seen as such. I can most certainly, with some surety, say that we do have a management system that is, pretty much compliant to the current legislation. So just because it's compliant doesn't mean that it's, the perfect system and everything's in place. But from a fairly high level perspective, it most certainly meets the intent of the legislation, with opportunities for improvement and so on. Going through the report itself, there's a lot of information there around the bits and pieces that we do around some of the controls and some of the activities that we are getting up to. The good news is, we do have an executive that is engaged and interested, to the point that they've taken on some development around the health and safety space. They've had opportunity to get out into the field and actually experience some of the work themselves and seeing how activities are being conducted. So, which is a good sign, because they are ultimately our officers and they have that overall accountability right across the organisation. One of the things that I try to relate this a lot to was how, our performance and the way we are performing from a health and safety perspective impacts on our community. And it makes sense, because the safer we are, the more we are, because safety, you can most certainly tie to a financial benefit. So, we are saving money by being safer, which impacts on our communities And it also, it gives our community a sense of knowing that we are, doing our activities in a safe way, that it almost rubs off onto the community themselves because they see us, doing good practice or doing best practice, and it rubs off on them, particularly around our contractors and things like that, because we do, we do come down fairly hard on our contractors from a health and safety perspective to make sure that they are meeting our minimum standards. So, so the benefits roll over into our communities and so on. So yeah, I'm open to questions. Fire away.
Start with Phil.
Yeah, I'm just really curious, having gone through this deep dive, is there anything that, if you had a magic wand and could change one thing as a priority, what would you hope to use that magic wand wish for?
Right at the end, I talk about our culture within our organisation, and I talk about our dependency, the way we are still very dependent on rules, regulations, approvals, management still very much involved in any health and safety decision. If I could make wave a magic wand, I would like us to be far more interdependent, that, we feel that, we take ownership of safety, we take ownership of each other's safety, and that, teams, employees, whatever you want to call them, contractors, are becoming accountable, they take ownership, and they are, ensuring the safety of each other, as opposed to always having to go to a procedure or a rule or get a decision from a manager. They become far more accountable for their own safety.
Morris.
Well, I was just looking at that paragraph, Mr. Chairman, and I agree, very, very good. And I was also thinking about, this is what we try to do with the farmers. Like, we're trying to get them to see what needs to be done without having to have any rules and regulations and Big Brother looking down on top. It has to come from within. And I'm a little bit concerned when we were talking about speeding before, about how we were sort of joking about it. That's really not ideal. I know it's not prudish, but it is, because speeding is a very dangerous thing to do. And we should be, we should be hard on that. We should be ensuring that we don't do that, and that we're a good example. And you say, Paul, it's those two sentences in that conclusion paragraph are very good. And it's good to see that we are on that journey.
Elsa, what are you?
Well, if you looked at the costs of this thing, in other words, 15 minutes every morning doing your health and safety report before you get in the vehicle. Say there's 40 vehicles going out in a day. I don't know that that's actually happening. That's 10 hours a day.
So from a time perspective?
No, I'm just looking at it. Okay, you say we're saving a lot and we're doing this and we're doing that. Have you looked at it from the other side?
Yeah, so if I had to make a direct correlation versus, 15 minutes of someone's time, say that's, if we were just, I'm just taking a random example of $25 an hour, we're talking, say
okay,
say $20 an hour, just to make it easy.
Yeah,
$15 being spent on doing that check on that vehicle versus, the hundreds and thousands of dollars it'll cost if that vehicle rolls with that driver in it and they're killed.
But all I asked, that's a good point. But do you look at the other side?
No, I don't, and there's a reason for that, because I just don't think there's a price on safety. So it's something that is, yes, there is cost, but I think the benefit outweighs the cost.
Amy?
And sorry, I'll just add to that, and it probably reflects more on the question, Councillor, like health and safety isn't something you do instead of doing work, it's part of how you do your work. So actually thinking about it as a separate thing, it's not a separate thing, it's just part of what we expect and how people should be going about doing their work. And then I think it would be really helpful if you could just explain, if I go back to page 31, when we look at the inherent risk of the current rating and the inherent risk of the reviewed rating, you'll see that they're the same and that they're extreme. But I think it's really important to talk about why that is, and that's all about consequences, like you just raised.
Yeah, exactly that. So, you know, the consequence is always, you know, unfortunately, is fatality. So, you know, and at that rate of the consequence being fatal, you know, at it being the sort of, you know, the worst case scenario, you can most probably fiddle around with the likelihood. And, you know, that's most certainly what we do from a likelihood perspective, to try and put our controls in place, try and reduce the likelihood. But, you know, it'll always stay in that extreme space, you know, whether it's a fatality or a disabling injury of some sort. So, yeah, it's one of those risks that, you know, I think needs to, obviously, and I'm pretty sure around this room and around this table, you know, will agree that it is something that will always remain on our strategic risk register, and it will always remain at that high level, which will need the continuous monitoring and reporting and the governance around that.
I'm happy.
Good answer.
Happy to move that, Jim.
Thank you. Moved by Little. Seconded by John. In favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. Paul. Sure. Everyone's comments during that. Yes, very wise words, Morris, in terms of just the importance across it. But then yes, Alistair understanding that balance across the piece too, which I'm sure everyone is, you know, it does make sense. Rachel. 9.5, so this is our long-term plan learnings. So good to see this paper here. I know we discussed it a while back, and we're going to take this time to reflect. And yeah, thank you for your paper. I'll let you just write an introduction and brief overview.
Kia ora koutou. Through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. It's not that long ago, but it seems a while ago since we got through the LTP. But it's always good to look at that and reflect on learnings as we've discussed previously. So overall, I'd like to take the item as read in most part. For most part, what I'm going to do is just quickly go through the first summary and then move to the recommendations, and just give you a bit of a heads up in terms of what is the now what to those recommendations. What are we doing? What are we thinking about in regard to those pieces? Firstly, I'd also like to thank everyone for contributing to the review and the debrief. Without it, we can't get the learnings out. So yeah, much appreciated. It's funny, often, you know, you reflect in these times that often we just crank on and go ahead without, and it's been discussed around the table before, you know, how much do we celebrate the successes, but I think we do have a number of successes that we, you know, that were achieved through the long-term plan process. The extensive community engagement that was involved, yes, there's some challenges within that, and it's something that we're continually thinking about as an organisation, but there was a lot of involvement of community through a different range of activities, and that was identified by elected members. The fact that we did have that strong collaborative effort between elected members and staff to get through and get that long-term plan achieved, and the professional delivery of the plan, despite having a number of external pressures placed on elected members and staff throughout the process in regard to that decision making. Some of the key challenges identified included, again, on the flip side of the engagement, you know, how do we get a broader engagement? It wasn't necessarily as broad as it could have been. Ongoing discussions, and we know that they're still current, around financial sustainability and ratepayer concerns in the current fiscal climate. And some elements of communication, just so that we're making sure that we're on the same page, and particularly when it comes to complexity with message and different elements that we're working through. That, yeah, really helpful to make sure we're all on the same page. Good, cool. So in terms of recommendations, it's on page 39 of your paper. I guess just giving you a heads up about, what are we doing now in regard to these recommendations? So the number one is start early. It's always a bit of a gold thing to try and do, and it is what we are trying to do, I guess, in terms of that for the long-term plan project. And we are already defining, I guess, the different aspects that are involved in effective long-term planning and starting to look at, well, what are the steps in that process, because there are things that we can do now to enable us to have the understand the environment and what it is that we're trying to achieve to lead into more definitive decision making down the track. Broadening engagement, this is an element that has been discussed around council and among staff, and and it's an important element that's been identified across the organisation, and so there's a range of things that are happening across the organisation in that regard. We've had Sam join in the community engagement and the community engagement group through its development. It really does signal where the focus is for the organisation in that space. From a more granular perspective and thinking about the annual plan project and the rating review project for phase 2, there has been, as elected members have been engaged in, ongoing discussions about, what does that look like in terms of how do we do that with a broader audience. In terms of number 3, the provide better counsellor training and support, that will be a follow-up conversation that will begin with democracy services, just to make sure that there's awareness of that as a recommendation, and particularly, I guess, leading into the election year next year. In terms of communication strategies, that's something, as I've just referenced, is linked to the engagement piece, but we'll be discussing and working on that through the annual plan and rating review, signalling that, how do we make sure that we're really clear between the issues that are being addressed in the rating review versus that's been addressed in the annual plan, because that was something that would provide the complexity and made it harder for the community to understand what it was that each of those pieces of work we're trying to achieve. And I guess one of the components of that is the complexity does have an impact, and it's an ongoing bit of work that actually there is a bit of work in distilling a lot of information and complex information into palatable and digestible aspects. So there's something that we're continually thinking about and exploring. In terms of the critical reflection mechanism, number 5, I guess for us it's that ongoing need for us to be reflecting on how we are building that into our processes, and for the annual plan process, that's something that we're starting to do now, is consider how do we make sure that we build in that reflection process.
All right, thank you very much, Dave. It's a great paper there in terms of the journey and the recommendations at the end as well. So, John, I think you want to start us off.
Thank you. Great report. I'm pleased we got around to doing the LCP review. Just a question I had is, in the hearing process, just a wee gap and talk about misconceptions. There's actually a lot of misinformation coming through on submissions. And is there a process where we can deal with that nice and quickly? Look, I know we can't just stop the hearing, but is there support from staff, or as if we've got concerns over that, can we pass a note on that, gets found out as quickly as possible, we can rectify that information? We saw stakeholders making claims, we saw individuals making claims, and you had to think in your feet a couple of times. We did manage to steer it off, but there was still some stakeholders that made some claims that we never actually got around to clarifying, and Jeremy's aware of one. It'd just be really, because it becomes becoming a bit of a game in society, is this misinformation, and it's really hard in these hearings for us to get a really clear picture sometimes. So it'd just be nice to be able to, I know it's not an easy fix, but if people understand when they come to council and they're just talking about hearsay, it won't be warm. We need to stick to facts. I just see it as an exposure.
So through you, Chair, I assume you're talking about a situation where you have submitters come up and present information, and because councillors can only ask questions of clarification rather than enter into debate and discussion, there may be things being presented that are factually incorrect, but there's not that opportunity to correct.
Well, give it an opportunity to write a note and to start maybe to clarify. I know you probably won't get the time to go back to the person submitting, but maybe at the end of the submissions we could have little wee piece where we clarify what's happened in the day and actually get that in writing? I don't know.
So through you, again, Chair, we did in the decisions try as far as possible to sort of highlight points that came up at the hearing and where there were inaccuracies, reflect that back in the decision. But with so many submitters, I'm aware that that's probably quite buried in the detail. So that's certainly something we'll take as an action to explore and perhaps to reach out to our fellow councils and ask how they deal with that exact situation, because I'm sure there'll be some good strategies being employed around the country on that.
Michael?
Yes, well, I think we deal with that in deliberations, and that is their job to sift out the chart from the whatever, and often there is a council, a staff comment on those submissions. Very difficult to actually stop people coming in and saying things and saying, well, no, that's wrong. It's part of the democratic process. But a competent council should be able to sift through that stuff and make the decision we need to make at the end of the day.
And Lyndall?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's a number of things in there, John, isn't there?
Yeah.
Firstly, we're bound by that slightly awkward and blunt hammer submissions and blah blah process. So there's not much we can do about that. But I think and not giving oxygen to some of those issues is also an important element, and not wasting staff time, as much as I hate to say it quite like that, but maximising the good use of time prior, and it comes back to, I guess, recommendations kind of 4, is that actually having our policy and our messages clear well in advance means that we can stick to that story right the way through. And there will always be, differences of opinion and potentially inaccurate information. But if we are clear about what we are exporting as far as information and what we are accepting as advice, that's kind of the full extent of on the ground what we can do. It's just it's that broader. I hate calling it communications actually, because that implies that's a kind of a one-way conversation. It's not. Some of that it's about being able to listen prior to the process, as well as get our questions and our key messages across. So if we are able to do that well in advance of the submissions process, I would like to think that would reduce some of the risk of that. Reduce, not eliminate. It's always going to be there, and if it wasn't, we'd be a bit concerned if we all thought the same, right? So I think it's that broader kind of getting our messaging clear.
Thank you. And Phil?
Yeah, really good, and I'm glad we did it. And I guess some thoughts as a new councillor who hadn't been through the ringer before and reflecting on the ringer experience. It seems to me that there could be some really useful resources we could capture and prepare to support the next time through, especially for new councillors who hadn't quite understood what it's involved. So, for example, we could capture some of those war stories from the existing crew, capture them now and archive them ready to support the next cycle. There might be some selected video footage that could be the basis for some scenario-based training where you could sit some new councillors around a table and simulate a hearing event for 10 minutes with a particularly thorny customer and test different ways that people might effectively manage the response or things that shouldn't be done. Ahead of it, I did see something like that being quite useful for new councillors, so that put them through a simulated ringer experience before the real ringer, so that they're a little bit more ringer acclimatised before they encounter those potentially.
Thank you, Phil. It's good feedback. And Morris?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's a very interesting question you raised, John. As a submitter in the past, when you come and make a submission to a group like this, And excuse me, nobody asks any questions, and they all sort of dumbly at you. You think, well, what the hell am I doing here? You know, it's a waste of time. But on the other hand, if you ask them, and I could be blamed for this, asking questions from a group that actually gives oxygen to their thoughts, you know, and you can go down a path that is not desirable. So it is very tricky knowing that part of it, how much to, you know, I think the best thing to do probably in hindsight, if this is a war story, is really, you know, if somebody comes up and says something that's clearly wrong and rubbish, you just don't ask them any questions and let them say thank you very much and thank you for your submission and on to the next one. I don't know whether people have different views about that. But anyway, coming back to the report, I do think that this is a very good report, Dave. Thank you very much for that, and Rachel. Those recommendations are good. I don't know about separating councillors out for new councillors and old councillors. I think that we all
Absolutely.
can get that, you know, we can all learn something every time, and we all should get that information leading up to the next LTP.
Jeremy, you're next.
Yep, all good. Yeah, there are obviously situations. We obviously had one that was clearly wrong, and it was, you know, I'd love to confront some of these ones and be quite challenging. But then again, you have respect that they've come in and some might not know. But this organisation was obviously come from national. I asked where you got this statistics, and they said, oh, the policy person just wrote it out and I've read it. So there was no, so you got to be careful of what you're given. You should challenge it up because you'll get, you know, the information you're given, that's yours. So, but I do, it is very structured. I know you're going to have a structured process, but you've got to, I think a few questions doesn't hurt. It needs to, you know, I get annoyed that we can't be asked questions. I know we get told off, we can't make debate. And there are some people, we know who's going to debate. But there's actually some, you know, the other people that are quite nervous and come in and you actually really want to say, hey, they've made a real effort and real passionate. And you go, you actually want to engage with those because we do engage with those other people quite a lot. Ones that want to get in here and have an argument or just want to have their input. So I don't know if we've got the scope of, you know, assessing the situation. I suppose the chair has that control, but you know, we're very, I know you've got to have rules. So I'm trying to just say it'd be good to have a ability to move with whoever is here, because it is a bit scary sometimes for people, and us just saying thanks, and they go, oh, what does that mean? You know, we weren't able to ask a question. You can ask a question, clarify. Getting comfortable was quite an important thing to hear their point of view. So on the report, yeah, good. It's always time. I'd love to have the budget now, Tania, for that. That was good for next year. You know, like that's the reality. The more time we have, the more we can work through it. And last year was crazy. We just sort of got crunched up and we got there in the end. One of the other thing is that we can, and it's the comms, when we've gone around this liaison, a few meetings, you talk, and Tania, I said this to you, where your explanation of how the money's all going places, everybody didn't really ask too many questions because they're starting to think, especially from the rural people, understand, oh, so we're not paying for that now, it's going over everyone. They started, well, we haven't got, no, that sounds right, but we were trying to tell them that back then, and you had feds and everybody against the capital value, and now they're starting to understand. They go, oh, this looks quite a fair way. So it takes time for community to. You can tell them 100 times, and then all of a sudden they'll click. Oh, yeah, we understand what you're doing. So I don't know how you do that, but the sooner you get that out there and understanding, the longer it just takes time. So. So,
thank you, Jeremy. And Alistair?
Yeah, in 10 years' time, how many of us are going to be sitting around here that have been through a LTP? Oh, one, yeah. Oh no, Jeremy might.
Thank you for the vote of confidence, councillor. Appreciate it.
With your colleagues beside you. So, yeah, it's a whole new learning process, and from what you're putting here, this is a jolly good report. It needs probably to come in about 2 years out from the LTP, so you start thinking about it and moving forward. Because I know I was completely lost in the whole system, or you might expect that. So, yeah, no, good report.
Thanks. Two things. The urban engagement and inclusion bullet point is a challenge. Just want to highlight that and remind us that the Invercargill City Council submission on the representation review highlighted the fact that the urban constituency is actually more than 50%. So super important that we find some ways to engage with those communities early, and remembering that urban communities there are plural communities, and they are of very many different natures. So finding a variety of ways to get, there are migrant communities, and there are, I'm not going down that path, but
So you've choked him.
there are just as many urban, rural differences in communities too, but I'm just trying to highlight the fact that actually Invercargill City is not just one homogenous being. There are many. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lyndall. And, Bill.
Yes, it is a good report, and there's always learnings going forward. It does highlight the difficulty of engaging with the general public until they're impacted. But the questions of clarification is there for a good reason, so we don't get a debate. But a lot of people come in here, we had a lot more this time, but they're concerned enough, they're nervous. It's actually a democratic process. And the comment about war stories, I'm reminded about some of the making good decisions training. It wouldn't be hard to play out some scenarios on a couple of issues, and people can get quite enthusiastically into the roles. But it actually is, especially if somebody hasn't done it before, it's probably a good learning process for what you're going to go through, and take a couple of contentious things and give people roles, and they can actually be almost over enthusiastic. So it's quite entertaining, but there's probably some learnings out of it.
Actually, I don't have any war stories, Chairman, because this is the first time it's been this warlike.
War and peace.
John?
Possibly to Lyndall's point, we got suggested to us by the community we have a night meeting which wasn't planned, and that did get reasonably well attended. So I think, and we're seeing this with the catchment liaison committees, that the conversation come up in Waituna, this is really a tough time of year to get people in the room. So either you shift it to night times to get the farmers there and more people in community, or you shift it to October, but doing it in the 10th of the middle of November just doesn't work. And I'm just wondering if we just need to take that view to get the urban connection, because if they can't get it during the day, they can't get it during the day. And it was the amount of people that turned up for their night one was probably one of the better ones, and that was a bit ad hoc, that one.
There's more than one way to skin this.
I mean, that's would be efficient, like in the town. I think Al and I went to the town, and I think there were 2 people on board. We doubled the, and you go, look, nothing against those 2 people, that was great, but the reality of efficiency is, spoke for an hour, it was great to have one-on-one with them.
Good discussion.
But at the end of the day, you go, I shouldn't say it's not worthwhile, because they are important, but the reality is we need to have people there and engaging, because it takes a lot of time to organise those things too.
Great. All right, thank you, Jeremy. Well, it's been a very opportune to be able to reflect on it, and everyone to give their feedback. I noticed, Dave, you are taking notes there, so I think you have to go away and piece together even more from what you've heard. Thank you very much for a great report. Certainly did what we asked in terms of that reflection and what we're going to take forward for recommendations. Morris has moved. Seconded by
Little,
Favour.
and that's the first in my 3 terms, so thank you.
Great. In favour? Carried. Thank you very much. 9.6, our insurance update. Tanya and Tracy. All right. Thank you very much for this paper. There was a bit in there, including a rather good table summarising the insurance at the end. So I'll just get you to give an overview. It'd be great if we dive into it.
Thank you, Chair, and councillors. Yes, I'll take the report as read and just give you some highlights. So just an overall summary, we thought it was a good outcome. We spent quite a bit of time this year going through with Aon, our insurers, just looking at deductibles and excess options, the effect it has on our premium. So just in the summary, you see our total cost of general insurance, 210,000, and it's an increase of 29,000 or 16% from last year. So increased premiums, just the bottom of that page 41. The main reason for the increase is the material damage premium. This is due to the State Street pump station being added. That was had an effect of 23,000 added to the premium. And also rural assets and specialised monitoring equipment premiums. That premium increased a little bit. So back onto the next page, the table 1 gives you a premium comparison to last year, and you'll see there's some unders and some overs. Material damage and business interruption, increase of 46% compared to last year's premium. Specialised monitoring equipment, 42%. The reason for this one, the prior year they had the sum insured was actually lower. The underwriter gave a lower premium, so we actually undercharged last year. So that's for hence the increase this year. And then I've given an overview of just every asset class, so we can look through that. And if there's any questions afterwards, you can feel free to ask. But perhaps just onto page 44, comparison to budget. So the total insurance budget, excluding the infrastructure insurance, is 516,000. And council will be over budget this year by about 60,000. And it's detailed in table 3. You see income protection insurance is under budget, and the general and liability is over. Really a lot due to that liability insurance. So perhaps I'll leave it there and then leave it open for questions. I'm sure you will have some.
Thank you. Yeah, just important to note, like you did at the what you're saying at the end, just the different types of insurance, and that first piece was all on the general insurance.
So general insurance is everything excluding infrastructure assets, and liability is separate. Liability separate, income protection separate, infrastructure separate. Yes, it's general.
Yeah, it's the universe of insurances that we need to have in our head. Alistair?
Probably 2 things. One is, and I guess I look at it from our point of view, how are we covered as councillors in public liability or whatever? And secondly, I note in our budgets we have a pretty large sum of independent contractors, which come to a considerable number. How are they covered?
Some of us are not covered.
They're not covered?
Other than under the normal liability, should you be involved in something. But if you're asking, are you covered for directors type insurance?
Yes.
No.
So we have to carry that ourselves.
My understanding is that, I'm not a lawyer, we have inquired about this several times, and my understanding is that councillors do not cover
do not encounter the same degree of risk that directors do. And therefore, there's no specific policy for councillors, is what I'm trying to say, because we have inquired if councillors and officers would be covered. And we were told twice that it wasn't needed. The public liability or professional indemnity would cover most of our issues. But as I said, the instruction was that councillors' roles are not as considered as litigious as directors.
Nick, do you have?
Another question, but just part of that, all our private contractors to be on our list have got to have to check the boxes with their own insurance anyway, so they do have to be covered or they don't get a contract. But the other one I was looking at was the Aon assessment for Stead Street, which comes up to 11 million. Did they assess that themselves? They did. So that's an independent assessment of value.
Alison, just want to ask a question and then I'll go to Jeremy.
Supplementary one there. There's two types of contractors, as I learned the other day. There's ones that are brought in and they're subcontracted within the building here, I assume. And then there's the other contractors who operate machines. They're completely different, two lists, two different totals in our budget. It's the ones who come in here and operate. Are we covering them, or do they have to come in with their own personal cover?
Just recently asked that question again.
Yeah,
And
so
their answer is we're not covering them.
yes, they do need.
So they've got to come in with their own.
That isn't a
That's all
contract.
part of their hourly rate.
The contract up front, it's usually specified.
Yep. I can understand the other ones who are operating a machine, they've got all the, okay, thank you.
Bethia, would you like to?
So I'll just add to that if I may. Each time we've got council, which is a contracting anybody who's providing consultancy or contracting services, a decision is made as to what kind of cover we expect them to carry and at what level, and that will be built into a contract. So I'm imagining, I don't know what the limits would be, but if you've got someone driving a digger, the amount of public liability insurance that you might expect them to carry might be much higher than someone that's coming in and doing a two-piece week, a piece of work that lasts 2 weeks. And, there's some advice, but rather than a decision. But it is built into all of our contracting templates, so there is a decision made case by case.
Thank you. Question, Elsa? Thank you. Jeremy?
Just in regards to rural assets and dwellings, I did talk with one phone call from a leasee indicating that he was talking about insurance and then finding out that they actually insure our buildings, which is not common in a farming a lease agreement. So firstly, I thought, why are you insuring our assets? Because usually the owner insures, make sure they have got insurance. So, but because of the value of the building processes now, the increase in costs, the premiums have obviously gone up, which affects their income. So I was just saying, but I'm just checking. They're obviously reviewing that. Are we still pushing it here? It's an interesting scenario where they're having to front bill incredible cost difference in insurance.
So as it says here, councillor, that a number insure themselves through, they're all actually through.
So some are actually insuring
our assets.
Yeah, our assets. We're not insuring it and then passing
Sorry.
the cost on.
We are noted on the insurance policy as the owner.
Yeah.
Okay, so they are the owner of the policy, we're the owner of the asset.
Is it
the other one? Sorry.
So
Are they all the same leases?
So there's the old leases and the new leases. Yeah. There's two insurance clauses, and these are clearly under the old lease, and it says very clearly that that's what they are to do. But we agreed, and I think it's written here, that we want to review that with the lessees.
So yeah, in essence, either we can insure the assets and pass the cost to them, or they can insure the assets and bind us to the recipient. So either way, we know that the asset is insured for an appropriate level. The discussion that we were having with Aon is whether we should increase the deductible, because it is an excess in our language, deductible in their language, because by increasing that, the cost of the insurance would come down. But we do feel that we need to be having a conversation with the lessees in this case, because if we suddenly change the deductible and something happens, then they need to have been involved in that decision.
John?
Yeah, look, my position when we lease properties, we pay for the insurance, but the values are agreed on by the owner, and then it's up to the individual to work out what his premiums to that, what their premiums to that. So I think it's a smart move to let the lessees choose which company they use, but obviously we just have to be across what those values are. Simple as that. Because you get claims coming through, it's going through three parties, it gets messy.
Yeah, but it is our asset, we need to have the protection.
Yes,
If
yes,
something happens and they've leased it, we need to get the proceeds of that, not them.
yes,
Yeah.
We do carry the cost of the excess, and that's why,
yes.
and potentially going from 1,000 to 5,000 needs to be a discussion.
Alistair, did you have?
Yeah, my understanding of all this is that you cannot insure somebody else's property. So therefore, the people who own the property have to insure it and then pass the invoice on.
You can bind it and acknowledge whose it is.
Be pretty doubtful.
That's what has been happening.
Yeah, that's what might be happening, but we want to get that clear, I think. Because in any I've done, it has still been owned by the owner, and he'll allow you to use whatever company you wish to do, but it's still all in his name. And part of the clause in the lease is that you will do nothing to damage.
Contribute to damage.
Yeah. Well, I'll maybe leave that one with you. If you're in terms of your confidence level, then you can take that away. Otherwise, I think we'll just move on to the next, because yeah, that one's sort of been covered quite well.
Well, I'm happy unless the councillor wants us to come back with clarification.
Yeah, oh, well, yes, I'm not saying no, yes. Let's get it
To the
clear.
one on the ability to bind.
I'd just like us to have clarity about what you're asking us to come back to. Is it the clarity around how the relationship works between us and lessees in relation to building insurance?
For their ability to insure an asset, not theirs.
Yeah, they shouldn't be able to insure your asset,
Yes, that's a matter you'd like clarity on.
because I'd hate to insure your car.
We should be doing.
All right, and
Yeah.
the end, Lyndall?
Yeah, just very quickly, I have to say I'm somewhat surprised that we've only had a 16% increase in our premiums. And overall, that figure is still quite low as far as, when we look at the grand scheme. So well done, whoever's doing those negotiations and those manipulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah, if I could point out even better, is that if we took out the increase of Stead Street,
Yeah.
the actual increase is 3%.
Yeah.
So
When everybody else is facing.
a lot of work has gone into this, I must say,
Yep.
it's been successful.
Thank you.
Recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
It was moved and seconded by Phil. Favour? Great, thank you very much. Appreciate all your work with the insurance. I know
It's not
it's
easy.
later on as well. 9.7, page 50, changes to postal delivery.
Okay, so New Zealand Post have proposed some changes to postal delivery. And we considered the impact and the risk it will have on our services, particularly rates, delivery rates invoices, and annual fees and charges invoices. And overall, we feel the impact won't be too large because we have particularly in rates, they've got sufficient time, the ratepayers receive their invoices early October and the payment is due end of November. So they've really got sufficient time, even if there's going to be a delay in the post. And we've also really promoted emailing of rates, invoices, and as well as the fees and charges. So going forward, don't expect too much risk. Next.
Any questions on that? Thank you for letting us know. Alistair, you got a question?
Why can't we email it? Everybody else does.
Yeah, so we really do promote email, but you do get your old-fashioned people who still prefer a paper copy in their postbox.
But we were told this morning there's only 16% of the bills go out by email.
I think, councillor, that's of the annual fees and of the compliance invoices. They've got a very good email database. There's 3,500 to 4,000 invoice consent holders, and they're highly engaged. We've got 51,000 in assessments, 36,000 rate payers. So we're up to 8,000. We're up to 8,000 invoice by email.
But if you look at that, it's going to cost you $1 to send it out, isn't it?
We are actively promoting it. If you can help, that would be good.
We seem to have a very good handle on the numbers in terms of where things are sitting.
Oh, it's something that I think we got another 1,000 this year.
We did.
So
Yeah, great.
not to say that's as much as we'd like. We can do better.
Yeah, it does take the other side to come. Yeah. John?
I thought we're already at the 3 days per week at the Royal. We're sitting up, placing them on 5 days a week.
We're 5 at winter.
We're 3.
I'm free in town.
Yeah, I see 3, yeah.
We're 3 in a tumbleweed.
Right, Lyndall?
Yeah, my concern, two concerns. Firstly, we shouldn't solely rely on electronic versions of anything, in my view. You only need a decent earthquake and you've got no electronic anythings. And secondly, then the transition, how we manage the transition. I can't remember when New Zealand Post are planning on introducing this change, this blunt hammer of a change. But there needs to be a strategy to transition the rest of the ratepayers. So, at the very least, we need to be doing both with them, because technology doesn't always work, and also some people are going to take a while to transition. If we are really going to insist that it's only electronic, then we've got to allow a pathway for that to happen.
Chair, through you, we can't insist that it's email only.
No,
not through for rates. They have to be delivered to as known address, and they choose then to have it by email. And the choice is they have to tick that they've chosen them.
Yeah.
And Michael?
Yes, well, actually, some of those areas, I want to skip sending them and we'll take the service away altogether.
Yeah.
It doesn't really talk about how the courier service works, because a lot of the contractors are also doing that. A lot of stuff arrives now in package form. The amount of letters is certainly massively dropped off. But if we don't do that, we're going to get a newspaper. Really. A lot of people have gone electronic and that as well, but it is sort of an essential service that people can ring up and get something delivered. Yeah.
Inviting papers too.
All right, thank you very much for this paper and letting us know. Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Alistair. In favour?
Aye.
Carried. Nine point eight on page 68. Amy has provided our annual activity plan. This is the one I was referring to earlier. So this is what steers the ship of the committee in terms of our planning. I'm just moving to it now. Amy, if you'd like to give a brief overview.
Yep. So, as the chair said, the annual activity plan outlines our program for the year. Just also use it as an opportunity to comment on what you may or may not be seeing in your agenda for this particular meeting relative to expectations that have been set previously. And I've just, highlighted some of those matters in my paper in the bullet points on page 68. We have covered some of those papers already. Just to say, in terms of the legislative compliance review that I referred to earlier in our internal audit item, that has been undertaken. We have received the report back in relation to that. The reason it's not at this committee is because I've provided feedback on that. We're waiting for the final report, which we will then, like the other audit paper, put a management response to. and then we'll bring that back to the next committee. In particular, I'm keen that with that paper in particular, we're reflecting the some sort of risk lens of that. So it's fine to say areas where there might have been compliance or not, but just understanding the nature of the risk. So I've asked Wynne Williams to read Amber Green that for us, and then we'll do that management response and bring that back. Revisiting what the chair said early on, obviously this is our last meeting for the year, and it would be we saw in council earlier the proposed schedule of meetings for next year, but I'm keen to get any feedback that you might have on what's worked well this year, or anything you would like to see that's different. We've got the insurance items coming through regularly now. We've got the long-term plan learnings and regular feedback from our auditors. Is there anything else that you would like to see, or the things that you are seeing that you do not want to see or do not think should be part of the work of this committee relative to your terms of reference?
And so our terms of reference is on page 5 of our pack. So if you did want to cast your eyes over it. So Lyndall, if you'd like to start us off.
Just the government funded projects, given Lucy's update this morning, re Kanoa, important that we have an update on this fairly early on in the new year, so that we know stuff. So, you know, although they've kind of, current ones are mostly under control, we don't let that slip off, I guess, this morning.
There is, so two things in relation to that. Absolutely. It has been a feature of this committee that we have regularly reported on that program of work. And if programs of work, particularly big capital works, are to continue, we would absolutely continue to report that through to this committee. As you may be aware, there's an independent governance group. Well, no, there's a governance group that exists within council that has an independent member, Robert Buchanan, which oversees risks in relation to the programs of work. And as the capital works program and the Jobs for Nature program have all but finished, I think we're in the last year of our Jobs for Nature program, we've expanded the terms of reference for that group to include all government funding, recognising the importance of central government as a partner to us to make sure that we are overseeing risks in relation to the delivery of those commitments. And so there'll be a broader suite of reporting through to this committee around that. So yes, we can continue to do that, yes.
I use number 3, and our terms of reference is integrity matters, including elected members' interests and ethics-based policies and issues. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'm wondering whether we should. Well, I know we had a useful couple of workshops, I think, this year about governance responsibilities and behaviour and performance. And I think that needs to really to evaluate that in terms of the risks to the organisation perhaps in a little bit more formal way. We should at least continue with those workshops where we have independent people come in and a really good discussion about our responsibilities in the governance field.
Yep.
So that might be something to add.
Absolutely. Look, I think I would immediately. So one, we will go away and have to think about what that could look like. 2, I think the intent of that point is where there are matters of risk in relation to issues around code of conduct or et cetera, that there's an opportunity to be able to report on those to this committee because they are risks to the effectiveness of governance. So we will make sure that we do that. But I'm also conscious that in matters such as, and giving you assurance that perhaps the elected members' interest register has been completed and is up to date, etc., etc. We could be reporting that back through here as well, just making sure that matters in relation to hygiene matters, as I call them, are attended to, and there's a level of compliance that is expected.
That's important. I'm thinking of the situation that other councils get themselves into, like Wellington, for example, or ECAN a few years ago, or Tauranga, and they, where a commissioner has to come in. We want to avoid that situation at all costs in terms of our democracy and our representation of our ratepayers, because that, while those people that come in might be very efficient, and strictly speaking, it's not a democratic situation. So we want to protect the democracy, but we want to make sure that we are doing the job.
So Amy, I think one for to be reflected on in terms of for the coming year. Okay, thank you, Morris. John?
Yeah, I suppose something that's come to light in the last 6 months for us is, and I don't quite know where it would land with how you would package it, but more around our exposure through central policy changes and how we get caught up and we're burning resources and then we're trying to swing the other way. We have some exposure, A, with the community engagement and reputation, and also B, with our spending, having to redivert and focus. So how can we package it in a way that's not really throwing a red flag in our reports, but how can we report that as to why we're comfortable with how we're managing this space?
That's big. Very much so. It's yes, the other outside factors driving it from once again, I think it does sit on the risk register, but it's actually picking it up and doing something with that.
Sorry, Becky.
I think if you add to that one, we've burnt a lot of money and time by trying to keep up with the government and being first. I think we've got to learn maybe to be a follower and just pick it up and not put our resources in, because the resources that are going in are actually our ratepayers' resources. And we've been burnt over the farm environmental plans that they did that pilot thing on. They're gone. And then we're working away flat out to get into gear now again, and there was a lot of staff time and our time went into it to make a change, and it's gone.
The cost of disruption is probably what we're looking for, isn't
Yeah.
And certainly, I believe on the risk register there is a point there around that those external drivers being the Wellington levers that come. I think having that mechanism within this committee to stop and consider that and all those impacts that you're talking about is vital. And just how as an organisation we are managing that.
So we can minimise it.
Lyndall?
Yeah, just two things. In response to that, Alistair, I wouldn't like to think that work was wasted. I think that a lot of that good work is still useful and relevant. Just needs a little bit of a rejig. But I don't, I wouldn't like us to think that was all wasted, because I don't think it has been. But my point for things in the future, I'm not sure, and it might be just me, where some of the other conversations we're having, where the risk elements of those show in our risk and assurance reports. For example, the climate change subcommittee and the baseline work that Anka and the team have done, that doesn't show through in any of these reports, and that climate change conversation in the broader sense is something that we need to be across here. And also maybe in the next 12 to maybe 18, it depends on how you feel about it being pre-election or post-election. We need to sit down and rediscuss our risk appetite.
Yes.
And what are our 10 top risks, and at which point we trigger, an alert. Because actually this council haven't had that conversation really. So, I don't see why we can't do it before the October next year, but it's just, you might need different advice on whether we want to settle it now and then just rejig it later, or have a really good bash at it in the new term. But those are two things I think it's a lot of things that we don't quite see the risk element of. And maybe I just don't understand that I'm seeing it, I don't understand, or whether it's not clear enough.
I think, and then also, Amy, I also had that risk appetite discussion on my
cool.
list as well. So, Alistair, I don't want to tackle farm plans here. Just to make sure. So, as long as it's about the process,
I've had the nod from Oracle and it went that way. So I'm happy.
Okay, thank you.
Look, I look at a general level, there's more risk in being reactive than proactive, and I would endorse what Linda was saying, that most of the stuff we've done, even if it's changes, we're still ahead in a lot of areas. So when you're looking at your risk matrix, sometimes you might do some work and feel a bit gutted that something stopped or it changes. So you're still in a bit of a, we've got the most up-to-date water and land plan in the country at the moment, and it took a long time to get there, but actually we've probably got the most robust plan framework anywhere in New Zealand at the moment. So there's some positives.
Amy, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments. And firstly is, we're always going to be responsive to what happens at a central government level. And, as things change, so do we. I think it's really important. It's a good point, well raised, that, how do we have that discussion here and look at how the organisation's managing that risk, knowing that it is a risk. And secondly, reflecting on Linda's point about how do you get items to come to this committee from other committees, and I'd suggest to you that you all are members of other committees, and at any time if you're discussing matters of a risk nature, you are very welcome to suggest, whether you're chairing or not, to the chair that you can refer items through to this committee, and we can get them. That's one of the ways that we can get them coming through.
I certainly endorse that as well. You're sitting on full council, or otherwise, if you want audit and risk to take a deep dive into an area, then do ask for it.
Just philosophically, you could zoom right out and say this is one huge risk management organisation managing the risk of the intersection at a regional level between society and the environment. So
it is.
It's kind of part of our job is to navigate that over time, that challenge.
All right, thank you very much, Amy. I think you've captured some good points there.
I'll move that, Jim.
Thank you very much. Little move. Seconded by John. Thank you. And he put his hand up. I was there
again.
I'll get you next time. In favour?
Chuck your cup in.
Carried. All right, so we are now we will have a tea break, but we'll just move into public excluded. We do not have any extraordinary or urgent business here, so I'll ask Mariette that we've come to the end of our public agenda.
Yes. So we have a few items to discuss in public excluded. The reasons is stated on page 71. And the items we're going to discuss is confirmation of the public excluded minutes of the meeting 9 October. And item 1 is then cyber security risk report. Item 2, 2023 to 24 audit management report. Number 3 is Legoima for the inquiries during 1st of January to 30 June. Then number 4 is legislative compliance. Number 5 is the policy update. 7 is the government funded projects risk management report. And then lastly, the governance level risk management overview.
Thank you very much. Moved by.
Can I?
By Neil, in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. So we will. Press the button. And it's paused. Fantastic. So we will take a tea break.
Yep.
15 minutes. So back at 2 minutes to 3.
2 minutes.